Gate B-17 was already paging final boarding when Alyssa Carter heard the sound that rewrites a life. A leather briefcase skidding across tile, then a man sucking for air like the world had suddenly run out. A nurse, a promotion flight, 9 minutes, and a stranger turning blue at her feet. Atlanta's terminal smelled like burnt coffee and jet fuel, packed shoulder to shoulder with people rushing past each other like they were invisible. Alyssa had spent 5 years earning this moment, 5 years of night shifts and missed holidays and swallowed exhaustion. She could almost taste the future. Then the man collapsed, and the crowd did what crowds do now. They lifted their phones instead of their hands. If you've ever worked yourself to the bone for one chance, you'll understand what happens next. Watch to the end, because one choice in that terminal exposes who we've become and what it costs to stay human, like the video and comment where you're watching from. The sound of that briefcase sliding across the airport tile did not start in Concourse B. It started in the kind of morning most people never see, when the city is still half asleep and the air feels cold even indoors. It started with an alarm that Alyssa Carter did not let ring twice because she had trained herself for years to wake up before life could demand it. 4:52 a.m. The chirp sliced through the dark of her apartment in South Atlanta, thin and sharp, and Alyssa's hand moved on instinct, fingers finding the phone on the nightstand and silencing it before the noise could pull her fully out of sleep. For a moment she lay there listening, waiting for the familiar weight in her chest that came with another day of pushing through. The heater clicked. Somewhere outside, a car door shut. The room smelled faintly of laundry detergent and the eucalyptus lotion she kept by the bed to rub into tired hands. Her phone glowed again. Not an alarm this time, a notification. She blinked, eyes gritty, and saw the subject line. Her brain did not accept it at first. She read it once, then again, slower. Congratulations. The word sat there in clean black letters like it belonged to somebody else. Alyssa's throat tightened. She pushed herself upright so fast the blanket slid to her waist and the cool air hit her skin. The glass of water she kept on the nightstand wobbled, threatened to tip, then settled again. She unlocked the phone with a thumb that suddenly felt clumsy. Approved. Senior nurse supervisor. Required appearance at the Northeast Regional Healthcare Conference in Boston. Flight 118 10:10 a.m. Today. Alyssa stared until her vision blurred. She read the email a second time, then a third, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into a cruel joke. They did not. The words stayed steady. Her hands began to tremble, a small, involuntary shake that embarrassed her even though she was alone. She pressed the phone to her chest. The cool glass and metal met the warmth of her skin. Her heartbeat thudded against it. She let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob, then clamped her lips together like she could keep the moment from spilling out and breaking. Across the room, on the wall above a narrow dresser, a framed photo caught the light from the phone screen. Bree, 19, college hoodie, big grin that made her look like she owned the world. Alyssa had taken that picture on move-in day, standing in a dorm hallway that smelled like fresh paint and nervous excitement. Bree had thrown her arms around Alyssa's shoulders, squeezed so hard Alyssa's ribs ached, then stepped back and smiled as if she had been waiting her whole life to say, "I made it." Alyssa swung her legs out of bed. The floor was cold under her feet, and the chill snapped her into motion. She moved through her apartment quietly, not because anyone else was sleeping, but because she had lived so long on the edge of exhaustion that she treated silence like a kind of safety. The kitchen light buzzed when she flipped it on. The apartment revealed itself in the harsh glow. A dish in the sink, a paper towel roll half empty, a stack of mail on the counter with a red stamped notice peeking from the middle, a calendar on the fridge with work shifts scribbled in tight handwriting, a magnet holding Bree's class schedule that had begun to curl at the corners. Alyssa poured water into the coffee maker, then stopped with her hand on the glass pot. She did not need caffeine. She needed proof. She needed the world to confirm what her phone had promised. She checked the email again, thumb-scrolling eyes scanning the lines like a nurse reading a monitor. Today. She whispered it out loud, testing the sound in the air. Today. Something in her chest loosened. Not all the way, never all the way, but enough that she could breathe deeper. She went to the bedroom closet and pulled out the small suitcase tucked in the back corner behind a pile of folded blankets. It scraped softly along the carpet. The wheels were stiff as if they had been waiting too long for a reason to turn. She set it on the bed and unzipped it. The fabric smelled like plastic and old storage. She smoothed the lining with her palm, making the empty space neat like she was preparing a bed for a guest. She opened a drawer and reached for the one blouse she saved for days that mattered. Navy blue plain, clean, the kind of shirt that made you look like you belonged somewhere more important than a hospital supply closet. She held it up and inspected it under the light fingers, searching for a stain, a loose thread, any sign that life had gotten to it. It looked fine. It looked like hope. Alyssa folded it carefully and placed it in the suitcase. Then she added a pair of dress pants, her best flats, a simple cardigan. Toiletries went into a clear bag. Hair ties, a small comb. The travel-size deodorant she had bought months ago and never used because she had been saving it for a trip that felt worthy. Her nursing badge sat on the dresser. The plastic was scratched from years of cleaning and contact with hospital doors and sanitizer. Alyssa picked it up, turned it over between her fingers, then set it back down. She stared at it for a beat longer than necessary. The badge had been her identity for so long that leaving it behind for the day felt strange, like walking outside without her keys. She glanced again at Bree's photo. Bree had been 6 when Alyssa started at Peachtree Regional. Alyssa remembered that first week like a scar. New badge, new unit, new faces that did not bother to learn her name. She had come home after a night shift with her feet aching, her hair still smelling like antiseptic, and Bree had been sitting at the kitchen table drawing a picture of them together. Bree looked up and asked if Alyssa could take her to the park after school. Alyssa had promised yes before she remembered she was scheduled for overtime. Bree's face had fallen fast and quiet, and Alyssa had learned what it felt like to break your own heart in small pieces. 5 years later, Bree was in college. Alyssa had gotten her there with 1,000 sacrifices that never made headlines. Alyssa's phone buzzed again, a call this time. Tasha Monroe. Alyssa answered, and Tasha's voice hit her ear like a celebration that had been waiting to happen. "Tell me you saw it." Alyssa leaned her hip against the counter, closing her eyes. "I saw it." Tasha made a sound that could have been a laugh or a squeal. "Girl. Girl. I swear I just looked at the roster and there it is. Senior nurse supervisor, you." Alyssa smiled, but the smile trembled at the edges. "They want me in Boston, conference, like today. That's how they do it." Tasha's voice carried the sharp humor of someone who had watched the system chew people up. "They put you in a room full of polished shoes and PowerPoint slides and they see if you blink." Alyssa swallowed. "What if I mess it up?" "You do not mess things up." Tasha said it like a fact, like she was correcting a lie. "You fix things. You fix everything. Half the time you fix things nobody even knew were broken." Alyssa opened her eyes. The kitchen light reflected off the counter in a harsh line. "Ms. Hartley said the regional team asked for me." "They did." Tasha's tone softened. "Because you are the one they call when the unit is on fire. You are the one who shows up when everybody else is tapped out. You think those directors do not hear about that?" "They hear." Alyssa let out a slow breath. "I'm scared to even say it out loud." "Say it out loud." Tasha's voice lifted again, bright. "You earned this the hard way. Now go take it." Alyssa's throat tightened. "I'm going." "You better." Tasha paused, then added quieter, and Alyssa, "Yeah, I'm proud of you, for real." Alyssa's eyes burned. She blinked hard. "Thanks." When the call ended, the apartment felt bigger and emptier, like the walls were holding their breath with her. Alyssa finished packing. She zipped the suitcase slowly, listening to the teeth of the zipper lock together, feeling the finality in the sound. She checked the time. 5:39 a.m. Plenty of time if the day behaved. She poured herself a mug of coffee anyway, more for the comfort of the routine than the caffeine, then stood at the counter and sipped while staring at the email again. She kept expecting a follow-up message. Correction, mistake, apology. She had lived too long without easy wins to trust them. Nothing changed. At 6:31, she showered. The water was hot for the first few minutes, then cooled as the old building demanded its share. She washed her hair twice like she could scrub away the years of fatigue. She put on the navy blouse and pants, then stood in front of the bathroom mirror and tried to smooth the fabric with her hands. She looked like a woman going somewhere important, if you did not look too closely at the faint creases in the shoes that had seen better years. She checked the time again. She had set the rideshare for 6:45. Right on schedule, a car pulled up outside. Alyssa locked the apartment door, tugged the handle twice out of a habit, then walked down the narrow stairs with her suitcase bumping softly behind her. The air outside was cold and damp, the sky still gray. She breathed in, tasting the faint smell of car exhaust and wet pavement. The driver was an older man with kind eyes and a clean shirt. He glanced at her in the mirror. "Morning." "Morning." Alyssa slid into the back seat and buckled her seatbelt like she always did, even though she had heard people say it was unnecessary in the back. They pulled away from the building. Atlanta rolled past in quiet early morning colors. Convenience stores flipping their signs to open. A bus groaning to a stop. A few joggers moving down sidewalks with their breath visible in the cold. Alyssa watched the city like she was leaving a familiar room and stepping into another. In the window reflection, she saw her own face. Tired but lit from inside by something she had not felt in a long time. She rehearsed in her head what she might say when she arrived in Boston. "Thank you for this opportunity. I'm honored." She tried different versions, hearing how each one sounded, wanting the words to land right. Then she thought of Bree. Tuition. Books. Rent. The endless math of survival that lived behind every decision. This promotion meant Alyssa could stop holding her breath every month. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Bree, you awake?" Alyssa smiled. She typed back with her thumb. Alyssa, being awake, got the email. The reply came almost instantly. "Bree, I knew it. I knew you would. I'm proud of you." Alyssa stared at the words until her eyes blurred. She looked out the window to hide her face from the driver. Her throat tightened again, the emotion rising fast and unannounced. "Alyssa, love you. Always." She slipped the phone back into her purse, pressed her lips together, and forced herself to breathe evenly. Traffic was light at first. The driver merged onto the highway, and for a few minutes the car moved smoothly, the city opening ahead of them. Alyssa's shoulders loosened. She let herself imagine the gate, the plane, the moment the wheels left the ground. Then brake lights flared ahead in a long red chain. The car slowed, then stopped. Alyssa checked the time. 7:02. Still okay. The driver leaned forward slightly, peering around the vehicles. "Looks like an accident up there." Alyssa's fingers tapped her knee once. Twice. She stopped herself. She looked at the dashboard clock, then at her own phone, as if one might be kinder. Minutes passed. The line of cars barely moved. A police vehicle crept along the shoulder with lights spinning. An ambulance followed. Alyssa's stomach tightened. Her mind began to calculate because that was what it did under pressure. If they cleared in 10 minutes, she would be fine. 15 minutes still possible. 30 minutes trouble. Her phone rang. "Miss Hartley." Alyssa answered quickly. "I'm on my way." Hartley's voice was tight, clipped with urgency. "Alyssa, please tell me you're already inside the airport." "Not yet." Alyssa kept her voice calm even as her pulse climbed. "There was a wreck. We're stuck, but we're moving. You cannot miss this." Hartley's words came sharp-edged by something close to desperation. "They do not do second chances for these conferences. The regional directors asked for you." Alyssa glanced out at the sea of cars. "I'll be there, I promise." Hartley inhaled, then spoke slower. "Do not miss that flight." The call ended. Alyssa held the phone for a second longer, then lowered it to her lap. She stared at her own reflection in the dark screen. For a moment, she looked like she did on nights when she was trying to keep a patient alive and her hands were steady even when her mind was screaming. The driver glanced back. "Everything okay?" Alyssa forced a small smile. "Work thing. Big day." He nodded. "We'll get you there." The traffic finally began to crawl forward. Cars moved in small, reluctant bursts like the highway was waking up from a bad dream. Alyssa watched the minutes slide by anyway. She pressed her palm to her thigh, grounding herself in the simple pressure. By 8:34, the airport signs appeared. The terminal rose ahead gray and sprawling. Alyssa's breath loosened when the driver pulled up to departures. She paid quickly, thanked him, and stepped out into the cold air with her suitcase. The automatic doors opened, and sound swallowed her. Announcements, footsteps, rolling luggage voices layered on voices. She moved into the crowd, scanning overhead signs. The departure board glowed above the mass of travelers. Flight 1182 to Boston. Gate B17. Boarding 9:40. Alyssa checked the time. 8:37. She had an hour, enough if she moved. Then she saw security. The line snaked back and forth, thick and slow, full of families with strollers, business travelers with laptops, people shifting their weight like patience was a coin they were spending unwillingly. Alyssa's stomach tightened again. She joined the line, pulling her suitcase close, shoulders squared. People around her chatted casually. Someone laughed. Someone complained about a delayed flight. Alyssa stood silently watching the line inch forward, her eyes flicking to the clock every few minutes. A man behind her sighed loudly. A woman ahead of her argued into her phone. Alyssa kept her gaze forward. She had learned something, and nursing panic was contagious. So was calm. She wanted calm. When she finally reached the bins, her hands moved fast and practiced. Shoes off, belt off, laptop out, toiletries bag. She slid everything forward, stepped into the scanner, lifted her arms when told, and stood still as the machine whirred. The TSA agent waved her through. Alyssa grabbed her belongings, shoved her shoes on, and pulled her suitcase free. She moved away from the checkpoint with her heart still pounding. She checked the time. David iced. She walked toward Concourse B, following signs, weaving through travelers like she had learned to weave through hospital hallways. She kept her pace brisk but controlled. Running drew attention. Attention drew delay. Delay cost everything. The concourse opened into a long corridor of gates and shops. Smells collided in the air. Cinnamon, fried food, perfumed coffee. A pastry stand displayed glossy donuts. A news kiosk flashed headlines. A child tugged on a parent's sleeve and whined for candy. Alyssa kept moving. She could see the sign for B gates, then the smaller signs pointing toward B17. Her breath eased. She was close. She passed a coffee kiosk. The line was long. She did not slow. Alyssa's phone vibrated in her purse. She ignored it. She kept walking until the sign for B17 came into view overhead like a finish line. She could see the gate area, now chairs arranged in rows, a few passengers already seated with carry-ons at their feet. She slowed slightly, a small release of tension moving through her shoulders. She was going to make it. Her phone vibrated again. This time she pulled it out. "Bree, I'm thinking about you today. Go crush it." Alyssa stopped walking. The crowd flowed around her, but she stood still, staring at the message. Her chest filled with a warm ache that felt like love and pride tangled together. She typed back, "Alyssa, I'm doing this for us." She hit send, then looked up. The gate was still ahead. She had time. She had enough time to take one breath that was not borrowed from stress. She started walking again. The coffee kiosk came into view a second time from another angle. The line had thinned. Only 3 people now. Alyssa hesitated. She had been running on fumes for so long that she rarely allowed herself small pleasures. A coffee that was not hospital break room sludge. A moment to stand still before she stepped into a new version of her life. She stepped into line. Ahead of her, a man in a charcoal suit barked into a headset, pacing in place like he could intimidate time into moving faster. A young woman in a hoodie scrolled through her phone with her shoulders hunched. Alyssa held her suitcase handle and waited, listening to the espresso machine hiss the grinder whine the barista call names. When it was her turn, the barista looked up. Her face was tired eyes, a little red hair pulled back tight. She offered a polite smile that warmed slightly when she saw Alyssa's expression. "What can I get you?" "Medium, coffee black." Alyssa's voice came out soft, then steadier. "And thank you." The barista's eyebrows lifted slightly. "You're welcome." Alyssa watched the barista pour the coffee, the dark liquid steaming in the cup, long morning. The barista's smile turned real for a second. "Since 5, Alyssa nodded. "I know that kind of shift." The barista glanced at Alyssa's blouse at the sensible flats, at the way Alyssa's hands looked like they belonged to someone who washed them too often. "You work in a hospital." Alyssa smiled. "Yeah. Where you headed?" "Boston." Alyssa took the cup carefully, feeling the warmth spread into her palm. "Work trip." The barista slid the lid on. "Good luck." Alyssa reached into her wallet and pulled out a bill, hesitated, then dropped it into the tip jar. More than she usually would. The barista blinked, surprised. "Thank you," the barista said again, quieter, and this time the gratitude carried weight. Alyssa lifted the cup slightly. "Hang in there." She stepped away from the kiosk and took a careful sip. The coffee was strong, bitter, exactly what she needed. She felt herself settle just a fraction into her own body. She glanced up at the departure board mounted nearby. Flight 1182 to Boston, on time. Alyssa breathed out slowly. She adjusted her bag strap and walked toward Gate B, 17 coffee in hand, suitcase rolling behind her. The airport moved around her. A couple leaned close, sharing earbuds, their heads touching. An older man sat alone on a bench staring at a photograph in his hands. A child ran past, chasing a balloon, while a parent called after him. Business travelers marched with narrowed eyes, phones pressed to ears, their lives measured in minutes. Alyssa walked through it all with the quiet focus of someone who had spent years making impossible things happen with limited time and fewer resources. She thought briefly of the hospital, Peachtree Regional, the unit that never seemed fully staffed, the equipment that always had some small malfunction, the way nurses traded shifts like favors because management treated exhaustion like a given. Senior nurse supervisor meant Alyssa would have more say. It meant she could advocate from a place that did not require begging. It meant she could fight for staffing without being brushed aside. She reached into her purse and touched the edge of her phone, feeling reassured by its presence. Then she heard it, a sound that did not belong to the rhythm of the terminal. Wheels rattling fast, too fast, a suitcase rolling without anyone guiding it. Alyssa's head turned toward the noise before she could decide to. She saw the suitcase first, a sleek black leather briefcase skidding across the tile, spinning slightly as it slid. She followed it with her eyes to where it had come from. A man in a charcoal suit stood near the coffee kiosk, one hand pressed against his chest. His posture was wrong, as if his body could not remember how to hold itself upright. His face had gone pale beneath the fluorescent lights, and his mouth opened as he tried to pull air that did not seem to come. Alyssa followed the sound of those runaway wheels the way her body always followed trouble before her mind had time to bargain. The briefcase had slid farther than it should have, spinning once, then bumping gently into the leg of a metal bench. It looked too clean for the floor, too expensive to be abandoned. She kept her eyes on it for a second, confused by how a thing could move with such purpose and yet belong to no one. Then she saw the hand that had let it go. The man stood a few steps behind the coffee kiosk, half-turned, as if he had meant to walk away from the counter and simply forgot how. One palm was pressed flat against the center of his chest. The other hovered in the air, fingers splayed, searching for balance. His suit was charcoal and perfectly tailored, the kind that made you think of boardrooms and private elevators. His tie was knotted neatly, but the knot had shifted crooked now, as if his body had yanked at it in panic. His face was wrong. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just wrong in a way Alyssa recognized instantly. The color had drained from his cheeks. His eyes were wide but unfocused, as if he were looking through the crowd instead of at it. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, and a thin sound leaked out. Not a full gasp. More like a failed attempt at one. Alyssa felt the warmth of the coffee in her hand, felt the smooth plastic lid beneath her thumb, and for a beat she hated the normalness of it. She looked past the man to the departures board mounted above the concourse. Flight 1182 to Boston. Gate B17. Boarding 9:40. She did not check the time because she already knew it the way you know the location of your own bones. She had been counting minutes since sunrise. She could feel them ticking through her pulse. Her eyes dropped back to the man. He tried to step forward. His knee buckled instead. He grabbed for the counter and missed. His fingertips scraped metal with a sound like a nail against a can, and then his body tipped heavy and ungraceful. He hit the floor shoulder first. His head followed striking tile with a sickening crack that cut straight through the airport noise. A small circle of space opened around him as people backed away. A ripple of murmurs moved through the crowd like wind in tall grass. Somebody said, "Oh my God." Somebody else whispered, "Is he okay?" A woman in a beige coat covered her mouth with both hands and stared as if she had never seen a human body fail before. And then the phones came up. Not all at once, not with malice, just with reflex. A man in a golf pullover raised his phone. Two teenagers leaned in, wide-eyed screens glowing. A woman in a blazer stepped backward and zoomed in. There was a strange calm in the way they did it, as if documenting the moment made it less real. Alyssa's stomach tightened. She stepped toward the circle suitcase rolling behind her coffee, still in her hand. She felt her own heartbeat in her throat. She felt her mind split in two directions at once. Gate B17, floor. Gate B17, floor. She heard herself speak before she made the decision to. "Call 911, she said. Her voice was not loud at first, but it carried sharp enough that heads turned. No one moved. Alyssa pushed through the loose ring of bodies. Her suitcase bumped against someone's ankle. Someone swore under their breath. Alyssa did not apologize. She set her coffee down on the tile without looking and let go of her suitcase handle as if dropping weight. She knelt beside the man, ignoring the cold seeping through the fabric of her pants. The floor smelled faintly of cleaner and spilled sugar. The man's skin looked waxy under the fluorescent lights. A thin line of blood ran from his hairline toward his temple where his head had hit. Alyssa leaned close. "Sir?" she said. "Can you hear me?" His eyes flickered, then rolled upward. His lips parted. No words came out. She placed 2 fingers on the side of his neck, searching for the carotid pulse. She found something weak and irregular, like a signal breaking up on a bad radio station. She tilted his head back gently, lifting his chin. His jaw felt heavy. His breath came shallow and wet, a rattle in the back of his throat. Alyssa looked up at the crowd and felt anger flare fast and hot. "Somebody call 911, she said again, louder now. "Now." A few people blinked at her like they were waking from a trance. Alyssa pointed at a woman holding a phone at chest height recording. "You. Call." The woman's eyes widened. Her thumb hesitated. She lowered the phone slowly as if it had suddenly become shameful, then fumbled to dial. Alyssa pointed at a man in a navy jacket standing nearest to the wall. "You go get an AED. It's on the wall near the gates. Run." The man opened his mouth like he wanted to ask questions. Alyssa's gaze held him. "Run." He broke into motion, pushing through travelers with a frantic urgency that finally made the scene feel as serious as it was. Alyssa turned back to the man on the floor. His breathing stopped. It did not slow. It stopped like a switch. Her fingers pressed harder at his neck. The pulse faded, then disappeared. There was a moment when her brain tried to deny what her hands were telling her. A moment when it whispered, "Not yet. Not here. Not now." Then her training snapped into place like a locked door. Alyssa pulled the man's suit jacket open, found the center of his chest, placed the heel of her hand on his sternum, stacked her other hand on top and locked her elbows. She began compressions. Hard, fast, straight down. The man's chest gave under her palms. Alyssa pressed with the force she knew was necessary, the force that looked brutal to people who had never done it. A woman gasped, horrified at the sound of ribs flexing. Alyssa did not slow. 1, 2, 3, she counted, voice steady and clipped. The crowd shifted. Somebody started crying. Somebody whispered, "She's a nurse." Alyssa counted louder. 10, 11, 12. She felt her shoulders engage, felt the strain in her arms almost immediately. She used her body weight to keep the depth consistent. She had done this in hospital rooms with teams and equipment and a code cart 10 feet away. She had done it in cramped spaces where alarms screamed and doctors shouted orders. Here, the only alarm was time. Above them, the airport's calm voice floated through the concourse. Now boarding, Flight 1182 to Boston at Gate B-17. The words hit Alyssa like cold water. Her mind flashed to Bree's face, to that message on her phone, to the email that had made her sit up in bed like her life had finally been called forward. She saw a conference room in Boston with neat rows of chairs and polished people who would decide whether she belonged among them. Her hands kept moving. 20, 21, 22. She finished 30 compressions and tilted the man's head back again. She pinched his nose and sealed her mouth over his, delivering 2 breaths. His chest rose faintly. She returned to compressions. Alyssa heard someone above her say, "Should we move him somewhere else?" Another voice said, "Is that legal?" Alyssa looked up, eyes sharp. "Do not move him," she snapped. "Back up, give space." The crowd obeyed the tone more than the words. They shuffled back, widening the circle. The phones remained some lowered now, some still raised, as if people could not decide whether to be ashamed or fascinated. Alyssa kept compressions going. Her count stayed steady. 28, 29, 30. 2 breaths, back to compressions. She heard the woman who had dialed 911 speak shakily. "They're sending someone. They said stay on the line." "Good," Alyssa said, not looking up. "Tell them he's not breathing. Tell them CPR started." The woman nodded rapidly and turned her phone toward her mouth, voice trembling as she relayed information she barely understood. Alyssa's own phone buzzed in her purse. Once, twice. She ignored it. The buzzing was distant, meaningless compared to the urgent work under her hands. Her arms began to burn. She felt sweat gather at her hairline. The terminal air felt colder now, or maybe her body was just dumping heat into effort. Alyssa counted again, loud and clear, anchoring herself in rhythm. 15, 16, 17. A man in a suit crouched at the edge of the circle, hovering uselessly. "I can help," he said, voice uncertain. "What do you need?" "AED," Alyssa said through clenched teeth. Someone went. The man nodded, then looked around as if the AED might appear out of thin air if he stared hard enough. Alyssa finished the cycle. 2 breaths. Back to compressions. The airport announcement came again. Final boarding call for Flight 1182 to Boston. Alyssa's throat tightened. Final. The word dropped into her stomach and sat there heavy. She pressed down harder as if force could keep the rest of her life from slipping away while she fought for this one. Alyssa's mind tried to bargain with her. "You can stop. Someone else can take over. You can run. You did what you could." But her hands did not listen to that voice. Her hands were busy doing the thing she had always done, the thing that had stolen so many of her holidays and so many of Bree's school nights. Alyssa did not know how to walk away from someone dying. She heard footsteps pounding on tile. A blur of movement approached, and the man she had ordered to run reappeared, face flushed, breathing hard. He held a white case with a red heart symbol on the front, as if he were delivering a lifeline. AED, he gasped. Alyssa nodded once like she had been expecting it. Her hands finished the cycle and lifted. Everyone back, she commanded. Do not touch him. The crowd retreated another step. Even the people filming seemed to realize that this part required respect. Alyssa tore the case open. The AED spoke immediately, calm and mechanical, a voice with no emotion and no hesitation. Remove clothing from patient's chest. Alyssa yanked the man's tie loose and unbuttoned his shirt quickly. The fabric resisted expensive buttons fighting her hands. She did not slow. She exposed his chest, pale and still. She pulled the pads from their packaging. The adhesive crinkled loud in the sudden quiet. She placed the first pad high on the right side, just below the collarbone. The second pad went lower on the left side of his ribs. Her movements were precise, practiced, the kind that looked like confidence, even when her heart was a fist in her throat. Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient. Alyssa lifted her hands. She scanned the circle, making sure no one else was touching him. Time stretched. The airport noise seemed to fade for a second as everyone waited for the machine's verdict. Shock advised, stand clear. Alyssa's voice cut through the moment. Clear, she said. Everybody clear. She looked around again, eyes hard, making sure the circle held. Her finger hovered over the flashing button. In the space of that one breath, Alyssa saw the gate agent at B-17, scanning boarding passes. She saw the jet bridge. She saw the plane door closing. She saw her own name on a badge that said Senior Nurse Supervisor and felt the weight of it in her hand like a dream. Then she pressed the button. The man's body jolted. His back arched slightly off the tile, then fell still again. The movement was violent and brief, like life had tried to kick its way back in and failed. A woman in the crowd made a sound like a sob. A man covered his mouth, eyes wide. The AED spoke again. Begin CPR. Alyssa's hands were back on the man's chest instantly. She began compressions again, harder than before, as if she could force oxygen into his brain through sheer determination. 1, 2, 3. Her arms shook now, the burn spreading into her shoulders and down her forearms. She kept her elbows locked. She used her body weight, rocking forward, pressing straight down. Alyssa counted out loud, voice steady even as her lungs worked harder. 20, 21, 22. Sweat slid down her temple and into her eye. It stung. Alyssa blinked hard, refusing to let it distract her. She could not spare a hand to wipe her face. The crowd's whispers returned in nervous fragments. Is he going to live? Where are the paramedics? I can't watch. The airport announcement floated again from farther down the concourse. Flight 1182 to Boston is now closing. Alyssa's stomach clenched. Closing. Not closed yet, closing. Her mind grabbed the word like a rope. She finished the 30 compressions and delivered 2 breaths, then returned to compressions. Her phone buzzed again, insistent. She ignored it. The buzzing felt like another world. Alyssa heard the security officer's voice somewhere behind the crowd. Make room, he barked. Make room. The circle widened as uniformed airport security pushed through with purpose. One officer knelt near Alyssa's eyes, scanning the man's face and the AED. You a medical professional, he asked. Yes, Alyssa said, not looking up. Nurse? The officer nodded. He spoke into his radio quickly. We have CPR in progress. AED used. Concourse B by coffee kiosk. Expedite. Alyssa counted again. 15, 16, 17. Her shoulders began to cramp. She felt the ache as a dull, deep warning. She ignored it. Pain was familiar. Pain was a place she knew how to live inside. A young woman crouched nearby, eyes wide and wet. He's bleeding, she said, pointing at the cut on the man's forehead. Alyssa glanced at it for half a second. The blood was not heavy, but it ran down his temple, pooling near his ear. Alyssa reached up and pulled the scarf from around her own neck. It had been there since she left the apartment, more habit than fashion. Because Atlanta mornings could still bite in autumn, she pressed it into the young woman's hands. Hold it here, Alyssa said. Firm pressure. Do not lift it to check. The young woman nodded quickly and pressed the scarf to the cut with both hands trembling. Alyssa returned to compressions. The security officer looked around. "Anyone else know CPR?" he shouted. A man in his 20s stepped forward hesitantly, hands half raised. "I do," he said, his voice cracked on the words. Alyssa looked up at him, sweat in her eyes, jaw clenched. "Can you do compressions?" she asked. He swallowed hard. "Yes." Alyssa nodded once. "Good. When I tell you, you take over. You lock your arms. You press hard. You keep the rhythm." The man nodded again, face pale. Alyssa finished the cycle. "Switch," she said. She guided his hands to the center of the man's chest, placing them precisely, then leaned back slightly as he began compressions. His first few pushes were too soft. "Harder," Alyssa said immediately. "You have to push like you mean it." His eyes widened. He pressed harder. The man's chest depressed under his hands. "That's it," Alyssa said. "Keep going." She counted aloud for him, keeping rhythm. 1, 2, 3. While he worked, Alyssa took a breath that felt like swallowing fire. She wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her wrist, leaving a damp streak. She looked at the man's face, searching for any sign of return, any twitch, any breath. Nothing yet. The AED spoke. "Analyzing heart rhythm. Do not touch the patient." The young man lifted his hands quickly. Alyssa raised hers too. The circle went still again. Alyssa felt the silence like pressure in her ears. "No shock advised. Begin CPR." Alyssa nodded. Back on, she told the young man, and he resumed compressions, face tightening with effort. The security officer looked down the concourse and shouted, "Coming through," as movement appeared in the distance. 2 paramedics pushed through the crowd with a stretcher. Their uniforms were dark. Their faces were focused and calm, the calm of people who had seen death too many times to panic at it. Alyssa felt relief surge so hard it almost made her dizzy. They dropped to their knees beside the man without hesitation. One paramedic placed a hand on Alyssa's shoulder briefly, not a comfort, just a signal. "You're the one doing CPR?" he asked. "Yes," Alyssa said. "What happened?" "Collapse," Alyssa said quickly. "No pulse." CPR started immediately. 1 shock delivered. CPR ongoing. No shock on last analysis. The paramedic nodded. "Good." He tapped the young man doing compressions. "Keep going," he ordered. The second paramedic pulled out a bag, valve mask, and oxygen, moving fast. He placed the mask over the man's face and began ventilating with smooth squeezes timed with compressions. The first paramedic attached leads to his monitor, eyes flicking across numbers. He spoke with efficiency. "Let's get an IV, prep epi." Alyssa shifted back slightly to give them space. Her knees ached. Her hands trembled now that she was not the one pressing down. She placed her palms on her thighs and tried to steady them. The young woman holding the scarf kept pressure on the cut, knuckles white. "Keep that," Alyssa told her. "You're doing fine." The woman nodded rapidly, tears spilling down her cheeks. The paramedic looked at Alyssa. "How long was he down before you started?" Alyssa glanced around, searching memory. "Seconds," she said. "He went down right in front of me." The paramedic nodded again. "That helps." He leaned in to check the pulse at the man's neck while compressions continued. "Pause," he said suddenly. The young man lifted his hands. Alyssa held her breath without meaning to. The paramedic pressed fingers to the carotid artery, eyes focused, counting silently. A beat, then another. "Pulse," he said. The word cracked something open in Alyssa's chest. Her mouth opened and a breath came out shaky. Her eyes burned. The second paramedic adjusted the oxygen mask and kept ventilation steady. The man's skin began to shift color, creeping back into his cheeks in slow, reluctant waves. His lips softened from blue toward something more human. The crowd exhaled in a collective rush. Someone whispered, "He's alive." Someone else started crying openly. Alyssa stared at the man's face like she could anchor him to the world by watching. The paramedics moved quickly now, securing the man, sliding a board beneath him, tightening straps, preparing to transport. Their hands were efficient, practiced. The stretcher's wheels locked with a click. As they lifted him, the man's eyelids fluttered. His gaze drifted unfocused, then landed on Alyssa with sudden clarity. For a second, his eyes held hers, and Alyssa felt a shock that had nothing to do with electricity. It felt like being seen through the noise. His lips moved beneath the oxygen mask. Alyssa leaned closer, instinctively trying to catch the words. The paramedic adjusted the mask. "Sir, don't talk," he said gently. "Just breathe." The man's eyes stayed on Alyssa a moment longer. His mouth moved again, but the sound was swallowed by the terminal, by the stretcher wheels, by the crowd's murmurs. Then his eyes closed. They wheeled him away toward the airport medical corridor. The security officers cleared a path. The crowd parted, letting the stretcher pass like a solemn procession. Alyssa stood slowly, her knees stiff. The world wobbled for a moment as adrenaline drained out of her body, leaving exhaustion in its place. Her blouse was wrinkled now, damp at the collar. Her hair had come loose slightly. Her hands shook. The coffee cup sat on the tile where she had set it down. The lid was still on. The coffee inside was cold. Her suitcase lay on its side, handle collapsed. Alyssa bent and pulled it upright with a motion that felt like lifting something heavier than luggage. Someone touched her arm lightly. A man's voice said, "That was incredible." A woman whispered, "Thank you." Alyssa nodded without meeting their eyes. Their gratitude felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. She looked up. The departures board was still there, glowing with indifferent certainty. Flight 1182. Boston, Gate B17. Alyssa's eyes locked on the line beneath. Gate closed. The words hit her with a force she did not expect because she had been too focused on keeping a man alive to imagine the world would keep moving without her. Gate closed. Alyssa stared, blinking as if the board might correct itself if she refused to accept it. It did not change. Overhead, the airport's cheerful voice echoed again. "Final call for all remaining passengers on Flight 1182 to Boston. Please proceed to Gate B17. Alyssa's throat tightened. Her stomach dropped. Final call. Gate closed. Both phrases living in the same moment, contradictory and cruel. She started walking toward the gate anyway. Her legs moved on their own, carrying her through the concourse, suitcase rolling behind her with a hollow rattle. People stepped aside as she passed, some watching her with something like respect, some just curious. Alyssa did not see their faces clearly. Everything felt slightly blurred at the edges. She reached Gate B17. The jet bridge door was shut. The gate counter was quiet. The line gone. The chairs near the gate were half empty now, scattered with abandoned napkins and a forgotten water bottle. The gate agent stood behind the counter, typing, eyes focused on her screen. Alyssa approached, breath shallow. "Excuse me," she said. The agent looked up, annoyance ready on her face. Then she saw Alyssa's disheveled blouse, the dampness at her collar, the way her hands trembled. The annoyance softened into caution. "Yes, I'm on Flight 1182, Alyssa said. Her voice came out steady, almost clinical, because panic had no place to land in her throat right now. "There was a medical emergency. I was helping someone who collapsed. I need to board." The agent glanced at the monitor, then back at Alyssa, her lips pressed together. "I'm sorry," she said. "The door is closed." Alyssa looked past the counter toward the window. The plane was still there. She could see it. It sat connected to the jet bridge engines, quiet as if it were waiting. "It's right there," Alyssa said. The words sounded like disbelief. The agent's eyes flicked away for a moment, then returned. "Once the door is closed, we cannot reopen it. We're in departure procedures." Alyssa's chest tightened. "Please." The word came out raw. She hated it. She hated needing anything from anyone. She hated begging. The gate agent's expression softened further, a hint of compassion breaking through the policy. "I understand," the agent said quietly. "I do. But I can't." Alyssa swallowed hard. "It's for my promotion," she said, and felt the humiliation of the word as soon as it left her mouth because it sounded small compared to what she had just done. "I worked 5 years. I have to be on that flight." The gate agent's eyes held Alyssa's for a brief moment, and Alyssa saw something there, a flicker of human recognition. "I'm sorry," the agent repeated. "I really am." Alyssa stood still, staring at the door, as if it might open out of pity. It stayed shut. Outside the window, a ground crew member moved with practiced calm. The jet bridge began to pull away from the aircraft, retracting slowly. The plane shifted slightly, a subtle movement that signaled the beginning of departure. Alyssa's breath caught. She watched as the distance between the jet bridge and the plane widened. The plane did not look like a machine now. It looked like something alive, pulling itself away. The engines whined to life. The sound rose, filling the air with a vibration that seemed to hum in Alyssa's bones. The plane began to push back from the gate, slow and steady, like a door closing in motion. Alyssa pressed her fingertips against the counter edge without realizing it, as if she needed something solid to keep her upright. The gate agent looked down at her keyboard again, giving Alyssa privacy by pretending to be busy. Alyssa watched the plane move backward, then pivot. She followed it with her eyes until it rolled behind another aircraft and disappeared from view. Her throat closed. Her vision blurred. The terminal lights seemed too bright. Alyssa stepped back from the counter, turning away from the gate, because she did not want anyone to see what was happening to her face. She walked a few steps, suitcase rolling, then stopped when her legs refused to carry her farther. The airport around her kept moving. Travelers hurried past, laughing, arguing, checking watches, living inside their own urgency. A family walked by with matching backpacks. A man in headphones stared at his phone. A woman balanced a toddler on her hip and bounced gently. Alyssa stood in the middle of it, feeling suddenly separate from all of them, as if she had stepped out of the stream and onto the bank. Her hands shook more, now the tremor no longer held back by adrenaline. Her shoulders ached. Her knees throbbed from the tile. Her throat felt thick, as if she had swallowed something that would not go down. She reached for her purse, fingers fumbling. She pulled out her phone. The screen showed missed calls. Her supervisor's name sat at the top. Alyssa stared at it for a moment, then turned the phone over in her hand as if the simple act of calling back might make the last hour feel real. She did not call yet. She could not. Not standing here under the bright lights with strangers flowing past. She tightened her grip on her suitcase handle and walked away from gate B-17, moving without destination, just moving because standing still felt like drowning. Her coffee sat forgotten behind her. Her scarf was gone, left pressed against a stranger's bleeding forehead, now traveling towards some medical corridor with a man she did not know. Alyssa walked until she found a row of seats near a quieter corner of the concourse. She lowered herself into one suitcase upright beside her and stared ahead at nothing in particular, while the airport continued to carry everyone else toward the places they were meant to be. Alyssa sat with her suitcase upright beside her, like a quiet witness, the handle still extended, as if she might stand and run at any second. The row of seats faced a wall of glass and polished steel. Nothing comforting. Nothing soft. People passed in a steady stream, shoes tapping wheels, rattling voices rising and falling in bursts. The airport kept moving the way rivers do. It did not pause for one woman who had just watched her future taxi away. Her hands would not stop shaking. She stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. The skin across her knuckles looked pale under the lights. There was a faint smear of grime across her palm from the floor. She flexed her fingers, then curled them into a fist and held it tight until the tremor eased slightly. Her phone lay in her lap, screen lit. Missed calls. Miss Hartley. 3 times. Tasha once. An unknown number that had tried twice. Alyssa looked at Hartley's name and felt a tightness in her chest that was not fear exactly, but something close. The kind of dread you felt walking into a manager's office after a mistake. Except this was not a mistake. It was a decision. It was a human body on a floor and a pulse that had vanished under her fingers. She tapped Hartley's name and lifted the phone to her ear. It rang. Once. Twice. Then the voicemail greeting came on crisp and professional, Hartley's voice recorded in a tone that did not belong to the woman who had begged Alyssa not to miss that flight. Alyssa opened her mouth to speak. Nothing came out. How did you explain the sound of a skull hitting tile? The way a crowd lifted phones like shields? The ache in your shoulders from compressions that did not want to stop? How did you explain that her promotion had been in her hand one moment and then gone the next because she had chosen a stranger's heartbeat? Alyssa swallowed and ended the call without leaving a message. She stared at the phone again, thumb hovering, then tapped her email app instead. The blank compose screen felt cold and formal, the way hospital incident reports felt, the way notes in a chart felt when you were trying to translate pain into a few clean sentences. To human resources. Subject line. She typed, slowly pausing after every line, as if she needed permission from her own conscience. To whom it may concern. I missed Flight 1182 due to a medical emergency in the terminal. A passenger collapsed and required immediate intervention. I performed CPR and used an AED until paramedics arrived. I understand this may affect my promotion status. Please advise on next steps. Respectfully, Alyssa Carter. She read it once, then again. The words looked thin. They looked like they belonged to someone who had simply been delayed by traffic, not someone who had fought for breath on an airport floor. She hit send anyway because she had no better tool than honesty and a timestamp. The message disappeared into the invisible machinery of corporate inboxes. Alyssa leaned back and closed her eyes for a second. Behind her lids, she saw the man's face gray around the mouth lips turning blue. She saw her own hands on his chest. She heard the AED's calm voice. She heard the final boarding call. The two sounds braided together in her memory until she could not separate them. When she opened her eyes again, the airport had not changed. A man in a baseball cap walked past carrying a bag of pretzels. A couple argued quietly near a charging station. Somewhere, a baby cried. The world remained stubbornly ordinary. Alyssa pushed herself to her feet. Her legs felt stiff. Her knees ached as if they were older than they had been this morning. She dragged her suitcase toward the airline ticketing desk. The walk felt longer now, not because of distance, but because of what she was carrying inside her. She reached the counter and stood in line behind a family, arguing about seat assignments. She watched them bicker over window versus aisle, watched them live inside small problems. When it was her turn, she stepped forward. The agent behind the counter was a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read, Denise. Her hair was pulled back in a bun that looked like it had survived too many shifts. She offered a polite smile that softened when she saw Alyssa's face. "How can I help you?" Alyssa cleared her throat. "I missed my flight." Denise nodded, fingers already moving toward the keyboard. Name. Alyssa Carter. Denise typed, glanced at the screen, then looked back up. Flight to Boston this morning. Yes? Denise's expression shifted slightly, a hint of curiosity. "Can I ask what happened?" Alyssa hesitated. She did not want to sound like she was trying to buy sympathy. She did not want to sound like she was asking for favors. "A man collapsed," Alyssa said quietly. "I'm a nurse. I helped until paramedics arrived." Denise's hands paused over the keyboard. For a moment, her professional mask cracked. "Oh," she said softly. Then louder, as if she were snapping herself back into procedure. "Okay, let me see what I can do." Denise typed again, eyes scanning. "The next flight to Boston is tomorrow morning at 6:20. Tomorrow." The word sank slowly into Alyssa's body. A whole day. A whole missed conference, a whole closed door. Alyssa forced herself to ask anyway, how much? Denise's eyes flicked to another part of the screen. Her mouth tightened, not unkindly, but with the strain of delivering bad news. 892, she said. Alyssa stared. The number did not belong to her life. It belonged to some other kind of traveler. She opened her banking app with fingers that felt thick and slow. Balance, $279.16. Her rent was due next week. Bree's books would be due next month. There were groceries, gas, a phone bill that came like clockwork. There was a student loan payment that never cared whether Alyssa had been a hero. She closed the app and looked up at Denise. She tried to smile. Her face did not cooperate. "I can't," Alyssa said. Denise's eyes softened. "I'm sorry." Alyssa nodded once, picked up the handle of her suitcase, and stepped away from the counter before her voice could break in front of a stranger. She walked without a plan until she found another quiet corner near a row of vending machines. The chairs were empty. The lighting was dimmer here. The air smelled faintly of stale chips. Alyssa sat and let her shoulders slump for the first time since the man collapsed. The tension that had held her upright began to release in waves, leaving behind exhaustion so deep it felt like her bones were hollow. Her phone buzzed again. Hartley. Alyssa stared at the name. Her thumb hovered over accept. She could picture Hartley's face, tight jaw, concern disguised as frustration. The kind of supervisor who prided herself on control because the hospital did not offer much else. Alyssa answered. Alyssa, Hartley said immediately. The relief in her voice lasted only a beat before it sharpened. "Where are you?" Alyssa swallowed. "I'm at the airport." Hartley exhaled hard. "They said you missed the flight." "I did." A short silence. Alyssa could hear airport noise on Hartley's side, the faint echo of footsteps and voices. Hartley was probably already back at the hospital juggling staffing, trying to hold a unit together the way Alyssa always did. "What happened?" Hartley asked. Alyssa closed her eyes. "A man collapsed in the concourse," she said. He stopped breathing. "No pulse. I did CPR. We used an AED. Paramedics got a pulse back." Hartley's breath caught. For a moment, her voice softened into something human. "Is he alive?" "Yes," Alyssa said. "He was when they took him." Another silence. Longer now. Then Hartley's tone returned to the one that lived in schedules and policy. "Alyssa, I need you to understand what this conference is," she said. "The regional team does not rearrange their agenda for a single nurse supervisor. It took months to get your name on that roster." Alyssa felt her throat tighten. "I know. And did you speak with the gate agent? Did you try to get on?" "Yes." "And?" "They wouldn't open the door." Hartley made a low sound of frustration. "We might be able to get you there tomorrow morning for the last day," she said, thinking out loud. "But the major meeting is today. The introductions, the panel, the official sign-off." Alyssa stared at the floor. The tile pattern blurred. "I emailed HR," Alyssa said. I explained. Hartley's voice lowered. "HR does not care about explanations," she said, and the truth in it was bitter. "They care about attendance and optics." Alyssa's jaw tightened. "So what do you want me to do, Hartley?" Hartley hesitated. Alyssa could almost hear her weighing words. "I want you to come back," Hartley said finally. "We'll talk in person. I'll do what I can." Alyssa's chest tightened with a different kind of fear. Coming back meant stepping into the hospital under the fluorescent lights and facing the same unit, the same shortages, the same endless demand. It meant facing the place that had taken her years and given her a promise, then snatched it back. "I don't have money for a flight today," Alyssa said. Hartley sighed. "We'll talk." Alyssa ended the call before her voice could crumble. She did not want Hartley to hear her fall apart. She sat very still for a long minute. She watched people walk past, each one carrying a bag and a destination. She wondered what it would feel like to be the kind of person who could miss a flight and simply buy another. Her phone buzzed again. "Tasha." Alyssa answered and immediately heard her friend's voice loud and raw with emotion. "Girl, are you okay?" Alyssa tried to speak. A sound came out that was not a word. She cleared her throat. "I'm here," Alyssa said. "I saw it," Tasha said. "Somebody texted. They said you did CPR at the airport." Alyssa swallowed. "Yeah." Tasha's voice softened, and Alyssa could hear the anger under it. "They said you missed your flight." Alyssa closed her eyes. "Yeah." "Say the words," Tasha demanded gently. "I need to hear you say the words." Alyssa's chest tightened. "I missed it," she whispered. I missed the promotion flight. There was a pause. Then Tasha said slower, "Did he live?" "Yes," Alyssa said, and the word came out like a fragile thing she was afraid to drop. "He had a pulse when they took him." Tasha exhaled. "Then you did what you do," she said. "You saved him." "And I lost everything," Alyssa said before she could stop herself. Tasha's voice turned sharp. "No, do not say that. You did not lose everything." Alyssa let out a humorless laugh. "I have $279 in my account," she said. "The next flight is almost 900. Hartley already warned me. There is no second chance." Tasha was quiet for a beat. Then she said, "Listen to me. People saw what you did. That matters." "It doesn't pay rent," Alyssa said. Tasha's voice cracked slightly. "Alyssa," she said softer now, "I'm proud of you." Alyssa's eyes burned. She stared at her hands again, still faintly dirty. "I don't feel proud," she admitted. "I feel sick." "That's because you're still coming down," Tasha said. "Go find somewhere to sit, drink water, breathe." "I'm sitting," Alyssa said. "Good," Tasha replied. "And if anybody tries to make you feel like you did something wrong, they can answer to me." Alyssa managed a small breath that almost became a laugh. "Okay." They hung up. Alyssa sat with the silence again. She reached into her purse and pulled out a bottle of water she had bought near security. She twisted the cap off with hands that still trembled and took a sip. The water was lukewarm. It tasted like plastic. She drank anyway. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Alyssa stared at it. She let it ring out. The voicemail icon appeared. She did not listen. She could not handle one more demand. Alyssa leaned her head back against the chair and closed her eyes. She told herself she would sit for 5 minutes, then stand and figure out how to get home. Maybe a bus. Maybe a rideshare she could not afford. Maybe calling someone and admitting she needed help. Her eyes opened when a shadow fell across her. An older man stood in front of her. He wore a tan jacket and held a folded newspaper under one arm. His hair was gray and thin, his posture slightly bent, but his gaze was steady. "I saw what you did," he said. Alyssa blinked. "Okay." The man nodded as if he understood the exhaustion in her voice. "You kept pushing even when everyone else froze," he said. "That took something." Alyssa looked away. "It was my job." "No," the man said, voice gentle but firm. "Your job is at a hospital. That was a choice." Alyssa swallowed hard. "It feels like a stupid one." The older man shook his head slowly. "It wasn't stupid," he said. "It was rare." Alyssa did not know what to do with that. She stared at her suitcase. The handle still stood extended like a stubborn finger pointing at the sky. The man hesitated, then added, "People talk about what they would do," he said. "They talk big. They imagine themselves brave. Then the moment comes and most people pick comfort." "You didn't." Alyssa's throat tightened. She forced herself to stand, not because she wanted to leave, but because sitting felt too vulnerable. "Thank you," she said, though she did not feel thanked. The older man nodded once and walked away, disappearing into the stream of travelers. Alyssa stood there for another second, watching him go, then turned toward the restroom. She needed to wash her hands. She needed the feel of running water to remind her she still lived in her own skin. In the restroom, she scrubbed her hands hard with soap until her knuckles reddened. She stared at her face in the mirror under fluorescent lights that made everyone look tired. Her hair was slightly frayed from the morning rush. There was a faint smear of mascara beneath one eye that she had not noticed earlier. She splashed water on her face, patted it dry with a rough paper towel, then forced her shoulders back. When she stepped out of the restroom, a security officer was standing near the entrance. He looked around as if searching for someone, then his gaze landed on Alyssa and held. He approached with the directness of someone used to making people follow. "Miss Carter?" he asked. Alyssa's stomach dropped. Her mind raced through possibilities. Did she break some rule? Was someone accusing her of doing CPR wrong? Did the man die after all? "Yes," she said carefully. The officer's face remained professional. Not unkind, not warm, just controlled. "The gentleman you assisted, he said he's asking for you." Alyssa blinked. "He's still here." "They took him to the airport medical facility for evaluation before transport," the officer said. "He is stable. He requested to speak with you." Alyssa's throat felt tight. "Why?" The officer's expression did not change. "I don't know." But he was clear. "He wants you." Alyssa hesitated. Every instinct in her body wanted to say no. She wanted to go home. She wanted to crawl into her bed and hide from the day. But she also felt a strange pull, a sense that leaving without checking would make her feel worse. She nodded once. "Okay." The officer gestured. "This way." Alyssa followed him through a set of doors marked "Employees Only." The hallway beyond was quieter, sterile, with plain walls and utilitarian lighting. It reminded her too much of her hospital. The smell of disinfectant was stronger back here, sharper. They walked past closed doors and a small office with a desk and a computer. Alyssa's suitcase wheels sounded loud in the quiet corridor, each click echoing off the tile. At the end of the hallway, the officer stopped outside a door with frosted glass. A sign read "Medical Clinic." He knocked once, then opened it. Alyssa stepped inside and stopped short. The man she had pressed on the floor was sitting upright on an exam table. His shirt was buttoned again. His tie had been removed, but his suit jacket sat neatly over his shoulders as if someone had draped it there with care. His face had color now. His lips were no longer blue. A strip of clean gauze covered the cut on his forehead. For a moment, Alyssa's mind struggled to reconcile this composed figure with the body that had been still beneath her hands. But it was not just him. 4 people stood around him, all dressed in dark suits, all holding tablets or phones. 2 men and 2 women. They looked like they belonged in a boardroom, not a medical clinic tucked inside an airport. Their posture was straight, their attention focused. When Alyssa entered, all 4 turned in unison. The man on the table looked at her and held her gaze, and Alyssa felt something shift inside her. She had expected gratitude. She had not expected the weight of being studied. "You," the man said. His voice was stronger than she expected, smooth and controlled. "You saved my life." Alyssa stepped forward slowly. She suddenly became aware of how she looked. Wrinkled blouse, damp hairline, shoes scuffed from the floor. She stood among these polished people like a smudge on glass. "I'm a nurse," she said quietly. "I did what I had to do." The man's eyes stayed on hers. "What is your name?" he asked. "Alyssa," she replied. "Alyssa Carter." One of the women in suits glanced down at her tablet, fingers moving as if recording the name. The man nodded once, as if confirming something internally. He reached into his jacket pocket with steady hands and pulled out a wallet. The leather looked expensive. He slid out a business card and held it between 2 fingers. The card was thick, cream-colored, embossed with dark lettering. Pierce Health Initiative. Malcolm Pierce, Chief Executive Officer. Alyssa's breath caught slightly. The name sparked recognition in the back of her mind. A donor plaque, a headline, a foundation mentioned in a hospital meeting that never included nurses. She had heard it in passing and never thought it would stand in front of her. Malcolm flipped the card over and produced a pen. He wrote a number on the back in quick strokes, then handed it to her. Alyssa took it with fingers that still trembled. "Call this number tomorrow at 9, Malcolm said. His tone was calm, but there was no room in it for debate. 9 sharp. Alyssa stared at the card, then looked up. "Mr. Pierce, I don't—" 9, he repeated, steady. "Do not be late." One of the men in suits leaned slightly toward Malcolm and spoke low enough that Alyssa almost missed it. "Sir, are you certain?" Malcolm did not look away from Alyssa. "Yes," he said, simple and final. Alyssa's mind scrambled for the right response. Thank you felt too small. Questions felt too many. "I missed my flight." She said the words slipping out before she could stop them, as if she needed him to understand the cost of the morning. Malcolm's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes, a brief tightening that could have been concern or calculation. "I know," he said. Alyssa blinked. "How?" Malcolm's gaze held hers. "Call tomorrow," he said again. 9. The security officer shifted slightly near the door, a gentle reminder that this meeting had a boundary. Alyssa nodded because she did not know what else to do. She slipped the card into her purse as if it might burn her palm if she held it too long. "Thank you," she managed. Malcolm watched her for a beat longer, then gave a small nod that felt like a dismissal and a promise at the same time. The officer opened the door. Alyssa stepped back into the hallway, the quiet swallowing her again. She walked beside the officer without speaking, suitcase rolling behind her, the business card heavy in her purse like a stone. When they returned to the public terminal, the noise hit her again, bright and chaotic. Alyssa stood for a moment near a wall, trying to process what had just happened. A billionaire CEO did not ask a stranger nurse to call him at 9 in the morning unless something important was attached to it. Alyssa's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number call. She stared at it, then let it go to voicemail again. She needed to leave. She needed somewhere to sit that was not under airport lights. She needed a shower and a bed and a door she could close. She opened a hotel app and searched near the airport. Prices flashed across the screen. Most of them were impossible. She filtered lower and winced anyway. The cheapest room within a short drive was $65 plus tax. Money she did not have to waste. Money she needed for groceries. Money that would not come back. But the thought of riding back to her apartment on no sleep, still shaking, still replaying compressions in her mind, felt dangerous. Alyssa booked the room. The confirmation email arrived immediately, cheerful and automated. She looked at it and felt something hollow. Outside the terminal, the air was colder. The sky had brightened into late morning. Alyssa called a rideshare and waited near the curb with her suitcase. Cars pulled up and left. People hugged goodbye. A couple argued quietly over a lost suitcase. When the ride arrived, Alyssa climbed into the back seat and gave the address. The driver nodded and pulled away from the airport. The city moved past the window highways and overpasses, fast food signs, clusters of hotels, and rental car lots. Alyssa stared without seeing much. She kept touching the purse where the business card sat, as if checking it was still real. At the hotel, the lobby smelled like stale carpet and lemon cleaner. The desk clerk barely looked up as Alyssa checked in. She handed over her card, watched the total hit her account, felt the sting of it. The room was on the second floor. The hallway smelled like old smoke trapped in paint. Her room door opened with a sticky click. Inside the room was small and tired. A bed with a thin comforter. A lamp that buzzed when she turned it on. A little table by the window. The air conditioner rattled even when it was off. Alyssa dropped her suitcase near the bed and sat in the chair by the window. For the first time all day, the silence felt like it belonged to her. She pulled out the business card. Pierce Health Initiative. Malcolm Pierce, CEO. The number on the back looked like any other string of digits, except it carried an instruction that had been spoken with authority. Call tomorrow at 9. Alyssa stared at the card until her eyes blurred. She placed it on the table like it might bite if she kept holding it. Her phone buzzed. A text from Bree. "Did you land?" Alyssa closed her eyes. Her throat tightened. She typed slowly. "Number 1, I missed it." Bree replied instantly. "What? Why are you okay?" Alyssa exhaled and decided to tell the truth, even if it sounded unbelievable. "A man collapsed at the airport. I did CPR. I couldn't leave him. My flight left." There was a pause. Then Bree's reply appeared. "Did he live?" Alyssa's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Yes." Another pause. "Mom, are you serious? That's insane. Are you okay?" Alyssa stared at the word okay. It felt like a question too large for a phone screen. "I don't know," she typed, then erased it. "I'm tired," she typed instead. "I'm safe." Bree replied. "I'm proud of you. I'm sorry about Boston." Alyssa's eyes burned. She set the phone down and pressed her palm to her forehead. She stood and walked into the bathroom. The mirror over the sink reflected her face in hard light. She looked older than she had this morning. She looked like a woman who had been wrung out. She turned on the shower. The water sputtered, then warmed. Alyssa stepped in and let the heat hit her shoulders. She closed her eyes, and the memory of her hands on the man's chest rose again, sharp and physical. She washed her hair, slowly, fingers massaging her scalp as if she could scrub the day out of her. She stayed under the water longer than necessary, letting the sound drown out the airport noise that still echoed in her mind. When she stepped out, she wrapped herself in a thin towel and sat on the edge of the bed. Her body felt heavy, but her mind would not settle. She grabbed her phone and opened a search engine. Malcolm Pierce, Pierce Health Initiative. Results filled the screen instantly. A website with a clean design and photos of hospital wings, ribbon-cutting, smiling executives. Headlines from major outlets, a picture of Malcolm in a suit shaking hands with someone important, his smile polished and practiced. An article about a multi-billion-dollar healthcare endowment. Another about funding for rural hospitals. Another about a partnership with medical schools. Alyssa scrolled, heart beating faster. She recognized the type of man he was from the edges of hospital life. The kind whose name appeared on plaques but not in hallways. The kind who made decisions that shaped staffing and budgets without ever stepping into a night shift. Alyssa set the phone down and stared at the ceiling. She had saved a person. That was all. And yet the card on the table said otherwise, the ink on the back insisting on tomorrow morning. Alyssa's phone rang. Bree, again this time a call. Alyssa answered, voice soft. Hey. Bree's voice came through bright and worried. Mom, why didn't you pick up earlier? I was in the shower. Bree hesitated. I keep thinking about you on that floor, she said. Are you shaking? Alyssa looked down at her hands. The tremor was faint now, but it was there. A little, she admitted. Did the hospital say anything? Bree asked. Alyssa exhaled. Hartley called. She said HR might not care. Bree's voice sharpened with anger. That's messed up. Alyssa closed her eyes. It's the world. Bree paused, then said, Mom, I looked up that name you texted me. Malcolm Pierce. That guy is huge. Alyssa opened her eyes. I know. Bree's words tumbled out. He funds hospitals like big money. People write about him like he's a kingmaker. Alyssa's jaw tightened. Bree, she said, gentle but firm. He was just a man on the floor. I know, Bree said quickly. I know, I just mean, he asked to talk to you, right? Alyssa glanced at the business card on the table. He gave me his card, she said. He told me to call tomorrow at 9. Bree inhaled sharply. Mom, that's not normal. Alyssa stared at the ceiling again. Nothing about today was normal. Bree's voice softened. Do you regret it? Alyssa felt the question land deep. She thought of the gate, the plane pulling away, the email subject line that had made her sit up in bed, the years of exhaustion and sacrifice, the humiliation at the ticket counter, the sick feeling when she realized she could not afford another flight. Then she thought of the man's lips turning blue. Alyssa swallowed. I don't know how to answer that, she said honestly. Bree was quiet for a moment, then she said, I'm glad he lived. Alyssa closed her eyes. Me too. They stayed on the phone a little longer. Bree asked if Alyssa had eaten. Alyssa realized she had not. Bree told her to order something, anything, and promised to send money if Alyssa needed it. Alyssa refused, as she always did, until Bree said, please, in a voice that sounded too much like Alyssa's own. Alyssa agreed to eat. When the call ended, Alyssa ordered a sandwich from a place down the street and watched the delivery tracker crawl across her phone screen like time moving too slowly. She sat in the chair by the window while she waited, business card still on the table, the number on the back facing up like an eye. Outside, cars moved along the highway. People lived their afternoons. The airport sat nearby, massive and indifferent. When the knock came at the door, Alyssa jumped slightly. She opened it and took the bag of food, thanked the delivery driver, closed the door. She ate slowly, not tasting much. Her body was tired enough to sleep, but her mind kept replaying details. the feel of ribs flexing beneath her palms, the crowd's phones, the way Malcolm Pierce's eyes had locked onto hers in the clinic, clear and heavy, as if he was holding something back. Alyssa washed her hands again after eating more thoroughly than necessary. She dried them and stood in the bathroom doorway staring at herself in the mirror. Tomorrow at 9. She set an alarm on her phone for 8:15 anyway. Then another for 8:30 because she did not trust herself to wake up cleanly after a day like this. She placed the business card beside the phone on the table, then lay down on the bed. The mattress was too soft in the middle, sinking under her weight. The sheets smelled faintly of bleach. Alyssa stared up at the ceiling until the room darkened and her eyelids grew heavy. Her last conscious thought was simple and stubborn. I saved a person, that is all. Alyssa woke before her alarm, eyes opening to a ceiling she did not recognize for a breath. Then memory rushed in like cold air under a door. The hotel room was dim, the curtains leaking a narrow stripe of dawn. Her shoulders ached in a deep bruised way, the kind of soreness that came from doing something violent in the name of saving. On the table beside the bed, the business card sat exactly where she had left it, the inked number facing up like a dare. She sat up slowly, palms braced on the mattress. The bed dipped toward the middle cheap springs shifting under her weight. She swung her feet onto the floor and felt the chill through her soles. Her hands trembled faint but persistent, as if her body still wanted to count compressions. In the bathroom, she ran cold water, watched it spill over her fingers, watched the tremor soften under the steady flow. The mirror gave her back a tired face. Eyes, shadowed hair flattened on one side. She looked like herself, and not herself like someone had moved the furniture inside her overnight. She brushed her teeth, then stood still for a moment with the toothbrush in her hand, staring at the sink as if it could tell her what to say at 9 a.m. Alyssa showered quickly, letting the hot water loosen her shoulders, letting it drown the sound of the airport announcements that still echoed in her head. She dressed in the same navy blouse and pants, the fabric still carrying yesterday's wrinkles, no matter how she smoothed it. She pinned her hair back tighter than usual. She kept checking the time on her phone, like it might jump forward and leave her behind. At 8:54, she sat on the edge of the bed, business card in one hand, phone in the other. The number on the back blurred for a second, as her eyes burned with a tiredness that felt too close to tears. She dialed. Her thumb hovered over the call button, suspended in a moment that felt like it lasted too long. She could still see the man's face on the floor, could still feel the AED pads in her hands. She could still see the gate door shut. She pressed call. 1 ring. 2. A crisp voice answered, clean and professional. Pierce Health Initiative. Alyssa swallowed. Hi, my name is Alyssa Carter. Mr. Pierce asked me to call this number at 9. A pause, brief and controlled. Hold, please. Soft music filled her ear, the kind meant to soothe people who lived in waiting rooms. Alyssa stared at the wall. Her leg bounced once, then she forced it still. She checked the time. 9 o'clock. The music cut off. A woman's voice came on the tone of someone who did not waste words. Ms. Carter. Yes. Mr. Pierce will see you at 10:30 this morning. A car will be sent to your location. Be ready in the lobby. Alyssa's mouth opened before she could stop herself. I do not have anything to wear. A pause, then the same calm voice. Be ready. The call ended. Alyssa stared at her phone as if it had the wrong message on it. She stood and opened her suitcase again, as if better clothes might appear through force of will. There was nothing. She owned what she owned. Practical, used. Clean, but not impressive. She put on her cardigan, then took it off, then put it on again because the room felt cold and she needed something around her arms. She paced twice, then stopped and sat again, breathing through her nose the way she did during a code when her hands needed steadiness. At 9:41, she heard tires in the parking lot. She went to the window and pulled the curtain aside. A black SUV sat among the faded cars like a piece of another world. The driver stepped out wearing a dark suit. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had never had to wonder if he belonged. Alyssa's stomach tightened. She grabbed her purse and left the room, locking the door behind her. The hallway smelled like old carpet and cleaner. The elevator was slow. When the doors opened to the lobby, the driver was already there, speaking to the front desk. He turned when he saw her. Ms. Carter. Yes. He nodded once and opened the back passenger door. Alyssa slid in. The leather seat was soft and cool. The interior smelled clean and expensive. The door shut with a heavy, quiet sound that made her feel sealed inside something she did not fully understand. The SUV pulled away. Outside the tinted window, the cluster of airport hotels gave way to highways and office parks. Alyssa watched Atlanta wake up. People walked with coffee cups. Cars flowed in steady lines. The sky was bright and clear, the kind of day that made you believe the world could be fair if you did not look too closely. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She ignored it at first, then pulled it out when it buzzed again. Messages stacked across the screen. Tasha. Where are you right now? A coworker girl. I heard you saved somebody at the airport. Hartley. Call me immediately. Alyssa stared at the names, confusion tightening her chest. She slipped the phone back into her purse. She could not carry their questions on top of everything else. Not yet. The SUV turned onto a broad street lined with tall towers. One building rose above the rest, glass and steel catching the sun. Near the top, the name Pierce gleamed in large letters. Alyssa's breath caught in her throat. The driver pulled to the curb at the entrance. A doorman stepped forward. The driver came around and opened Alyssa's door. Alyssa stepped out and immediately felt underdressed, not because her clothes were dirty, but because the space demanded a certain polish she did not own. The sidewalk was spotless. The air smelled faintly of stone warmed by sunlight. She walked into the lobby. Marble floors shone like water. The ceiling rose high above lights spilling down in clean lines. The sound of her footsteps softened, as if the building swallowed noise on purpose. A receptionist looked up, her smile professional, then sharper when her eyes flicked to the driver. The driver spoke quietly. Ms. Carter for Mr. Pierce. The receptionist nodded at once. Of course. She pressed a button and spoke into a headset. She is here. Then she gestured toward the elevators like she was directing someone important. An attendant in a crisp uniform stepped forward. This way, ma'am. Alyssa followed, purse clutched close. The elevator doors opened to a glass capsule. The attendant pressed a high floor button. The elevator rose smoothly, and the city dropped away beneath them. Alyssa stared out at Atlanta, spread wide roads like veins, buildings shrinking as they climbed. She felt her stomach shift slightly at the height. Not fear, exactly. More like the sensation of being lifted out of the life she knew and placed somewhere unfamiliar. The elevator opened onto a quiet floor. The air felt cooler. The hallway carpet looked thick enough to swallow sound. Glass walls revealed conference rooms where people in suits leaned over screens, mouths moving in conversations Alyssa could not hear. An assistant approached, young composed hair pulled back, eyes alert. Ms. Carter. Alyssa nodded. Please follow me. They walked past framed photographs on the wall. Malcolm Pierce shaking hands with officials. Malcolm Pierce standing beside a ribbon cutting at a hospital wing. Malcolm Pierce smiling in front of cameras. Alyssa's chest tightened. She had seen men like him only in posters and plaques, names that hovered over hospital budgets like whether untouchable, unaccountable. They stopped at a set of large wooden doors. Alyssa noticed something taped low on one door at child height. A crayon drawing, bright colors. Stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. The words were shaky, written with the careful effort of a child. Get well soon, Grandpa. Alyssa stared for a beat longer than she meant to. The drawing did not belong in a hallway like this. That was why it hurt. It reminded her that even powerful men were still someone's family. The assistant knocked once. A voice from inside said, "Come in." The door opened. Alyssa stepped into an office that felt too large to be real. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city. A wide desk sat near the center dark wood, polished to a mirror. A sitting area to the side looked like it belonged in an expensive hotel. The air smelled faintly of leather and clean paper. Malcolm Pierce stood by the windows with his back to her, hands clasped behind him. He did not turn right away. "Close the door," he said. The assistant closed it quietly and disappeared. Alyssa stood near the entrance, suddenly aware of how small she looked in a room built for control. Her heart thudded in her ears. Malcolm spoke without turning. "Tell me, Ms. Carter, what happens to people who miss their promotion flights?" Alyssa swallowed. "They lose the thing they worked for." Malcolm turned slowly. The man on the airport floor had been gray and desperate, his body collapsing in a way that looked helpless. This man looked carved out of calm. Color in his face. Eyes sharp. Hair neat. A small bandage near his forehead, the only evidence that his life had nearly slipped away. He walked to the desk and gestured to the chair across from it. "Sit." Alyssa moved forward and sat. The leather was soft, almost too soft. The chair was positioned slightly lower than his. She noticed that. She had spent years watching how power arranged itself without saying a word. Malcolm sat behind the desk and folded his hands. He studied her for a long moment, using silence like a tool. "I know about your flight," he said finally. "The conference. The promotion." Alyssa's chest tightened. "How do you know that?" "I made calls," he said, as if that was an ordinary thing anyone could do. He slid a thick folder across the desk toward her. "Open it." Alyssa hesitated, then pulled it close. She opened it and felt her breath catch. Peachtree Regional Medical Center. Her name. Employment records. Attendance logs. Performance reviews. Commendations. Notes from supervisors. Patient compliments. Pages that tracked her overtime hours in stark black lines. Alyssa's throat went dry. She had not seen most of these documents in her life. She had lived them, but she had not seen them stacked neatly like evidence. "How did you get this?" she asked, voice hoarse. "I told you," Malcolm said. "Calls." Alyssa flipped a page and saw the truth of her last 5 years laid out with clinical precision. The nights she stayed, the extra shifts, the unbroken attendance record, the commendation for keeping calm during an ER overflow when tempers flared and patients waited too long, the note about her mentoring new nurses, unofficial, unpaid, done anyway. Alyssa looked up. "Why?" Malcolm's gaze stayed steady. "Because you saved my life," he said, "and I wanted to know who you are when no one is watching." Alyssa's jaw tightened. "I'm a nurse," she said. "That's it?" Malcolm did not blink. "No," he said, "that is not it." Alyssa felt heat rise. "I did not do anything special," she said, pushing back against the weight of his attention. "Someone collapsed. I acted." "That is the point," Malcolm replied. "You acted." Alyssa glanced down at the folder again, then closed it halfway, feeling exposed. "I appreciate the gratitude," she said carefully, "but I need to go back. I need to speak with my supervisor. I need to try to fix what I lost." Malcolm lifted one hand, stopping her words. "Your hospital received $50 million from my foundation last year." Alyssa froze. She knew Pierce Health Initiative was a donor. She had seen the logo on posters in the lobby. She had watched administrators smile for cameras beside oversized checks. She had never heard a number. "I didn't know the amount," she said. "That money was for patient care," Malcolm said. His voice tightened slightly. "For staffing, for equipment, for nursing support." Alyssa swallowed. "We are still short-staffed," she said. "We are still making do every night." Malcolm's gaze sharpened. "I know." Alyssa's fingers curled against the chair arm. "Then, where did it go?" Malcolm leaned back, eyes steady. "Your administration did not spend it where it belonged." The sentence landed like a slap. Alyssa stared, mind resisting. She had lived with the assumption that budgets were tight, that everyone was struggling, that the shortages were a shared burden. Malcolm continued, voice calm but edged. "Executive bonuses, consultant fees, renovations in administrative areas, optics, My foundation's name used for publicity, the money used for profit. Alyssa's chest tightened. Images flashed. The broken vitals monitor in room 7 that sometimes froze mid-reading. The old beds that jammed. The way nurses rationed supplies like they were in a war zone. The way management called it resourceful. Alyssa's voice came out thin. "Are you sure?" Malcolm's eyes did not soften. "Yes." Alyssa swallowed hard. "How?" "I have been investigating Peachtree Regional for months," he said. "Financial records, complaints, staff turnover. The pattern is clear." Alyssa felt a coldness spread through her. "Why would you investigate us?" Malcolm's gaze held hers. "Because my wife was a nurse." Alyssa blinked. Malcolm looked toward the window for a beat as if the skyline could steady him. "Emergency department," he said. Long shifts, short staffing, administrators telling her to do more with less. She came home exhausted and still talked about her patients like they were family. Alyssa's throat tightened. What happened to her? Malcolm's jaw flexed. "She died 11 years ago," he said. "Stress-related heart attack, 42. The air in the room shifted. Alyssa stared at him and felt the grief under his words. Grief hardened into purpose. "I'm sorry," Alyssa said quietly. Malcolm nodded once. "After she died, I built the foundation because I could not accept a system that breaks nurses and calls it normal." Alyssa felt something twist inside her. She thought of nights when her own heart raced from too much caffeine and too little sleep. She thought of co-workers who joked about burnout like it was a badge. Malcolm's voice sharpened again. "I was flying yesterday to withdraw the funding." Alyssa's stomach dropped. "You were going to pull it." "Yes," Malcolm said, publicly, completely. Alyssa pictured the hospital, the units, the people who depended on it. She pictured closures, layoffs, patients turned away, her co-workers scrambling for jobs. "That would destroy us," she said. "It would force change," Malcolm replied, voice controlled. "Or it would collapse what refused to change." Alyssa's hands tightened. Anger rose hot. "And nurses would pay," she said. "Patients would pay. People who had nothing to do with theft would pay." Malcolm held her gaze. "Yes." Alyssa leaned forward slightly, voice rough. "So why am I here?" Malcolm stood. He walked to a cabinet along the wall and opened a drawer. He pulled out a folded scarf handled with care. Alyssa stared at it confused. Malcolm looked down at the fabric. "Yesterday someone told me you used a scarf to hold pressure on my head wound." Alyssa remembered handing her own scarf to the young woman. "I used mine," she said. Malcolm's eyes lifted. "No," he said softly, "you used this." Alyssa's breath caught. Malcolm turned the scarf slightly. A small stitched tag on the inside read Elizabeth. Alyssa's throat tightened. "Your wife's scarf." Malcolm nodded. "I carry it," he said. "It was in my briefcase." Alyssa pictured the briefcase skidding away across tile separating from him. The sound returned in her mind, hollow wheels on polished floor. "When I woke up," Malcolm said, voice thickening, "I saw that scarf against my head. I saw you." For a second, it felt like she was in the room. Alyssa blinked, hard eyes burning. Malcolm folded the scarf carefully and returned it to the drawer. He closed it and stood facing the windows for a moment, shoulders rising with a breath he seemed to force into himself. When he turned back, the CEO control returned, but Alyssa could see the man beneath it now. "You reminded me of something," Malcolm said. "There are still people in that hospital worth saving." Alyssa swallowed. "I'm not a symbol," she said quietly. "I'm tired. I'm trying to keep my head above water." Malcolm's gaze stayed on her. "I know," he said. "That is why it matters." He returned to the desk and pulled out another folder thicker. He placed it in front of Alyssa. "Open it." Alyssa reached for it with hands that trembled again. She opened it and saw legal pages charts, letters on Pierce Health Initiative letterhead. Her eyes skimmed until they found her name printed at the top of a page. Alyssa Carter, Director of Nursing. Her stomach dropped, then floated. Malcolm's voice was steady. "I am not pulling the funding," he said. "I am doubling it. 100 million. Alyssa stared. "That's impossible." It's conditional, he replied. Alyssa looked up. Conditional how? You will oversee how it is spent, Malcolm said. Staffing, equipment, scheduling policies, working conditions, oversight, accountability. Alyssa shook her head, immediately overwhelmed. I can't. I don't have an MBA. I'm not an executive. I've never run budgets like this. Malcolm leaned forward slightly. You know what nurses need, he said. You know what patients suffer through when corners are cut. You know the difference between a spreadsheet choice and a human consequence. Alyssa's throat tightened. That doesn't mean I can run a hospital. You don't have to run the hospital, Malcolm said. You have to protect nursing and patient care from people who treat them like numbers. Alyssa stared at the pages again, eyes blurring. Why me? Malcolm's gaze did not flinch. Because you had a choice yesterday, he said. A real one, with a cost. And you did not ask who I was. Alyssa's voice came out small. It didn't matter who you were. Exactly, Malcolm said. Alyssa's mind raced. She saw herself walking back into Peachtree Regional with a title that would turn heads. She saw administrators smiling tight smiles. She saw nurses watching her hopeful and skeptical. She felt the weight of responsibility settle onto her shoulders like another shift that never ended. Alyssa looked up. If I do this, she said, voice steadying, I have to fight them. Malcolm nodded once. Yes. Alyssa swallowed. They won't like it. They will comply, Malcolm said simply. Or they will be removed. Alyssa's heart hammered. She looked down again, scanning the terms. The language was real. The seals were real. It was not a vague promise. It was structure. She saw another page and felt her breath catch. Tuition assistance. Full coverage. 4 years. Bree's name was there. Alyssa's hand flew to her mouth. A sound escaped her half-breath, half-sob. Malcolm's voice softened slightly. Your daughter should not carry debt because you carried everyone else. Alyssa shook her head, tears rising. I don't want charity, she whispered. It isn't charity, Malcolm replied. It's repair. Alyssa wiped her eyes, quickly embarrassed. The office felt too quiet for tears, too polished for anything raw. Malcolm stood and walked around the desk, stopping a few feet from her chair. He did not touch her. He simply spoke in a voice that was less CEO and more human. My wife didn't die because she was careless, he said. She died because she was pushed until her body broke. I've been angry ever since. I've been trying to fix the system with money and pressure. Yesterday, you reminded me the system is still made of people. Alyssa stared at him. She thought of Elizabeth Pierce, a nurse who had come home exhausted and still cared. She thought of herself coming home to Bree, trying to keep love alive in stolen minutes. Malcolm returned to his seat and slid a pen across the desk. Alyssa stared at it. Her throat tightened. Signing felt like stepping off a ledge. She breathed in slowly. She pictured the hospital at night, lights dim in patient rooms, alarms beeping, nurses moving fast, doing the work no one saw. She pictured administrators in bright offices. She pictured patients waiting too long because staffing ratios were treated like suggestions. Alyssa picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. She steadied it by pressing her wrist to the desk. She signed her name carefully, the letters neat, deliberate. Alyssa Carter. When she set the pen down, she exhaled a long breath she did not realize she had been holding. Malcolm watched her for a beat, then stood and extended his hand. Alyssa stood on unsteady legs and shook it. His grip was firm and warm. It felt less like congratulations and more like agreement. Thank you, Alyssa, said, voice breaking. Malcolm's eyes softened. No, he said, thank you. The assistant opened the door quietly. She returned to escort Alyssa out. Alyssa gathered the folder, clutching it to her chest as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. The ride down in the glass elevator felt unreal. Atlanta dropped back into place beneath her. The lobby marble shone. People moved calmly. The world did not look like it had shifted, but Alyssa felt like she was walking in a new gravity. Outside, the SUV waited. Alyssa climbed in and sat with the folder on her lap. Her hands were no longer shaking, but her heart still raced. Her phone buzzed in her purse. She pulled it out and saw Bree calling. Alyssa answered. "Hey." Bree's voice came fast, breathless. "Mom, I just got an email from the bursar office. It says my balance is 0. Mom, what did you do?" Alyssa looked down at the tuition page in the folder and felt her throat close. Tears rose again, sudden and hot. "It's covered," Alyssa whispered. Silence on the line for a beat, then Bree's breath hitched. "Are you crying?" Alyssa let out a shaky laugh that broke into a sob. "Yeah?" Bree's voice cracked. "How? Why?" Alyssa pressed her forehead lightly against the cool window glass. "He did it," she said. "Malcolm Pierce." Bree inhaled sharply. "Because you saved him." Alyssa closed her eyes. "Because I did what I couldn't not do," she whispered. Bree began to cry on the other end, the sound small and overwhelmed. "Mom," she said like the word held everything she could not explain. Alyssa wiped her cheeks with the edge of her sleeve. "You're going to finish school," she said softly. "You're going to focus on studying. You won't have to carry this." Bree's voice trembled. "I'm proud of you." Alyssa's chest ached. "I love you," she said. "I love you too," Bree whispered. When the call ended, Alyssa sat still, breathing slowly. The SUV moved through traffic. Buildings slid past. Sunlight flickered across the window. Alyssa opened the folder again, hands careful. Near the back, a page sat slightly offset. She pulled it free and read the heading. "The Alyssa Carter Nursing Scholarship, $5 million endowment." Her vision blurred. She read the description: tuition support for nursing students with proven compassion preference for single parents and first-generation students. It was her life written into a future she had never dared to imagine. A sob rose in her chest, and she pressed the paper to herself, shoulders shaking as she cried quietly in the back seat. The driver kept his eyes forward. He offered no questions, only the gift of silence. When the SUV pulled into the hotel parking lot, Alyssa wiped her face and steadied her breathing. She stepped out with the folder tucked under her arm, like something fragile and precious. She walked toward the entrance, shoes soft on the pavement, the afternoon sun warm on her back, and she felt the weight of the last 48 hours settle into her bones in a way that was not crushing, just real. Alyssa did not sleep much that night. She tried. She lay on the hotel bed with the thin comforter pulled up to her chest, the folder on the table beside her, like a second heartbeat. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the airport tile again, felt the sternum under her palms, heard the calm voice of the AED telling her what to do. The memories did not come like dreams. They came like flashes, bright, sharp, unforgiving. Just after midnight, her phone rang. Hartley. Alyssa stared at the name for a long second, then answered. Hartley. There was a pause, and when Hartley spoke, her voice sounded different. Not softer exactly, more unsteady, like the ground beneath her had shifted too. "Where are you?" Hartley asked. "A hotel near the airport." "I need you to tell me what you did," Hartley said, and Alyssa could hear something close to disbelief in the words. "Because I just got off the phone with the hospital board, and then someone from Pierce Health Initiative, and I'm standing in my kitchen looking at an email that feels like it has the wrong name on it." Alyssa sat up slowly, one hand pressed to her forehead. "I didn't do anything," she said. "I saved a man at the airport, that's all." Hartley let out a short breath. "They're saying he's Malcolm Pierce." Alyssa was quiet for a beat. "Yes." Hartley's voice lowered. "They're saying he doubled the funding." Alyssa's eyes drifted to the folder on the table. "Yes." Another pause longer. "And they're saying you're coming back as director of nursing." Alyssa swallowed. "Yes." Hartley exhaled, and the sound carried something Alyssa had never heard from her before. Not anger, not frustration. Something like fear. Alyssa Hartley said carefully, "Do you understand what that means?" Alyssa's throat tightened. "I'm starting to." Hartley hesitated, then spoke with a bluntness that felt like an attempt at honesty. "I told you not to miss that flight," she said. "I told you there wouldn't be second chances. I said things I shouldn't have said." Alyssa stared at the ceiling. "Yes," she replied. Hartley's voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry." The apology landed strangely. Alyssa had imagined a dozen versions of this conversation. None of them included Hartley sounding like a person rather than a policy. Alyssa's voice came out quiet. "I don't want an apology over the phone," she said. "We'll talk in person." Hartley's breath caught. "They want you here Monday morning," she said. 8 o'clock. Boardroom, administration, Pierce representatives, the whole thing. Alyssa felt her stomach tighten. "Okay." Hartley lowered her voice further as if the walls might listen. "Alyssa, some people are panicking. The executives, they're asking who knew what. They're trying to figure out where the foundation got the information. They're trying to cover themselves." Alyssa's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to protect them." "I know," Hartley said, and her voice carried relief. "I just needed to hear you say you're coming back." Alyssa glanced at the folder again, then answered with the steadiness she did not fully feel yet. "I'll be there Monday morning." When she hung up, Alyssa sat in silence for a long time. She held her phone loosely as if it might buzz again and take the air out of her. Eventually, she set it down and walked to the window. The highway lights outside moved like a slow ribbon. Cars slid through the dark. Somewhere beyond them, the hospital stood still, running, still full of patients and nurses and unfinished work. Alyssa turned away from the window and set her alarm. Monday morning arrived with clear sunlight and a cold bite in the air that made her breath visible for a second outside the hotel entrance. She wore the same navy blouse, but she had pressed it with the hotel iron until the fabric lay flatter cleaner. Her hair was pulled back tightly. Her face looked calm, but her hands tightened on her purse strap as she stepped into the ride share. The driver dropped her at Peachtree Regional just before 8. Alyssa stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking up at the hospital's familiar brick and glass. She had driven to this building half asleep more times than she could count. She had walked in through those doors with coffee in her hand, ready to do another shift, ready to carry more than anyone should have to carry. Today, her stomach fluttered with a different kind of weight. She walked toward the entrance and pushed the glass doors open. The lobby was packed, not with patients, with staff. Nurses in scrubs stood shoulder to shoulder. Doctors in white coats leaned against walls. Housekeeping staff clustered near the elevators. Unit clerks, lab techs, respiratory therapists, security officers. Faces she recognized and faces she did not. The crowd filled the space so completely that Alyssa stopped short, one hand still on the door handle, unsure whether she had walked into an emergency meeting or something worse. Then she saw their expressions, smiles, tears, people watching her like she was the reason they had gathered. Alyssa's heart thudded. "What is this?" she whispered, but no one could hear her over the sound that started small and grew. Applause. It began with a few hands clapping near the back. Then more. Then the whole lobby erupted into a thunder of sound that bounced off the tile and glass. People cheered without shouting the way you cheer in a place where shouting feels wrong, but joy refuses to stay quiet. Alyssa stood frozen. A banner stretched across the reception desk hand painted in bright letters. "Welcome back, Alyssa." Someone had drawn a small red heart beside her name. Alyssa's throat tightened. Her eyes burned. She tried to step forward and her legs felt unsteady as if the floor was moving. Tasha broke from the crowd, first pushing through people with a grin and tears on her face. She wrapped Alyssa in a hug so tight it stole her breath. "You scared me," Tasha whispered into her ear. "And you made me proud." Alyssa laughed, once broken and shaky. "I don't know what's happening." Tasha pulled back and held Alyssa's shoulders. "Look around," she said. "This is happening." Hands reached for Alyssa. People hugged her. A nurse she had trained years ago squeezed her hand hard and said, "Thank you." A respiratory therapist nodded at her with something like respect. An older physician patted her arm and murmured good work. Alyssa's cheeks grew hot. She did not know where to put her eyes. The crowd parted slightly and Hartley approached. Alyssa had never seen Hartley look nervous. Hartley's posture was always controlled, her face always composed like she believed emotion was a leak that needed sealing. Today her eyes were wet. Her lips pressed together as if she was holding herself in place. "Alyssa," Hartley said, voice thick. Alyssa waited. Hartley swallowed. "I'm sorry," she said again, this time louder so the people closest could hear. "I'm sorry, I told you the flight mattered more than the person. I'm sorry I made you feel like your value depended on a conference room." A hush fell over the nearest cluster, not because people were angry, but because apologies from authority carried a kind of gravity. Alyssa stared at Hartley for a long moment, then nodded once. "We'll talk," she said quietly. Hartley nodded back, relief and shame tangled on her face. "Boardroom," she said. "They're waiting." Before Alyssa could move, a man in a suit appeared at Hartley's shoulder, one of the senior administrators. His tie was perfect, but his hands fidgeted near his belt as if he did not know where to put them. "Ms. Carter," he said, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "If we could step into my office first, we can discuss your new position privately." Alyssa felt the crowd tighten around her. Tasha's hand found Alyssa's elbow firm. A younger nurse stepped closer, her chin lifted. Another staff member muttered no. The administrator's smile stiffened. "Excuse me." Alyssa's voice cut through, calm and clear. "The boardroom," she said. The administrator blinked. "Yes, but I think it would be appropriate to review expectations in advance." Alyssa held his gaze. "I'll review them with the board," she replied. Behind the administrator, a woman pushed forward in a wheelchair. An older patient, her face lined, her hair gray and neat. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a folded paper. Alyssa recognized her. Not her name at first, but her eyes. The eyes of someone who had sat at a bedside for too many hours. The woman reached out. "You don't remember me," she said, voice wavering. Alyssa knelt instinctively, bringing her face level with the wheelchair. "Tell me," she said gently. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My husband," she whispered. 3 years ago. He coded on the 3rd floor. Room 312. You were the first one there." Alyssa's breath caught. The memory snapped into place. The winter storm outside. The monitor alarming. The rush of bodies. Alyssa's hands pressing down while a resident shouted orders. The husband's face turning gray. The wife sobbing in the corner. Alyssa took the woman's trembling hand in both of hers. "I remember," she said softly. The woman squeezed back. "He lived," she whispered. "He lived 2 more years, 2 more birthdays, 2 more anniversaries, 2 more mornings drinking coffee in our kitchen. You gave us that." Alyssa's throat tightened. "I'm glad she managed." The woman nodded toward the crowd. "We all are," she said. "That's why we wrote." Alyssa frowned. "Wrote what?" Hartley stepped forward holding a cardboard box. Not a small one. A full file box, the kind used for charts. She held it carefully like it contained something breakable. When the Pierce Foundation asked for staff feedback, Hartley said, voice breaking slightly, "People didn't send reports. They sent this." Hartley handed the box to Alyssa. It was heavier than Alyssa expected. Alyssa lifted the lid. Inside were letters, hundreds of them, handwritten pages on every kind of paper. Lined notebook sheets, hospital letterhead, folded cards, even a few torn pieces of brown paper bag with careful writing squeezed into the margins. Alyssa's vision blurred. She pulled out the first letter she could grasp. "Alyssa Carter sat with my mother when we could not get here in time. She held her hand and talked to her so she would not be alone." Alyssa's throat closed. She grabbed another. "She stayed after her shift to calm my son. She sang to him. She made him feel safe." Another. "She gave me her lunch because I had not eaten in 2 days while my wife was in ICU." Another. "She fought for my father when the doctors wanted to give up." Alyssa's hands trembled. The words on the pages were too intimate, too heavy. Each letter was a life, a moment Alyssa had treated as ordinary, because she could not afford to measure the impact of everything she did. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She did not wipe them. The lobby stayed quiet now, the applause replaced by a kind of reverent stillness. Alyssa reached into the box and pulled out another letter. The handwriting stopped her cold. Bree. Alyssa recognized her daughter's loops and slants, the way she crossed her T's, the way she pressed too hard and left faint dents in the paper. Alyssa's breath hitched. She read, "My mom misses school plays and holidays because she's saving someone else's mom. She comes home exhausted and still asks about my day. She deserves to know it matters." Alyssa pressed the letter to her chest and bent forward, as if the air had been knocked out of her. A sob rose, and she could not swallow it. She cried there in the lobby, holding her daughter's words, surrounded by people who had carried her through years without her realizing they were watching. Tasha's hand rested on Alyssa's shoulder, steady. Hartley's voice came softly. "We're with you," she said. Alyssa lifted her head, eyes wet, and looked at the crowd. Faces stared back, not demanding, not judging, waiting. Alyssa inhaled slowly. She stood still, holding Bree's letter, still clutching the box lid with her other hand. "The boardroom," she said again, voice steadier now. The crowd parted to make a path. Alyssa walked through it with the box held against her hip like a shield. She passed the reception desk, the banner, the elevators. She felt eyes on her the entire way, not as a spectacle but as a promise. In the boardroom, the air was cooler. The table was long and glossy. Administrators sat stiffly in suits. A Pierce representative sat near the far end with a tablet and a calm expression. Malcolm Pierce was not there, but his presence hung in the room anyway, in the way people's shoulders tightened when his name was mentioned. Alyssa set the box of letters on the table with a soft thud. The sound turned heads. She met the eyes of the administrator who had tried to pull her into his office. Then she met Hartley's gaze. Then she looked at the Pierce representative. Alyssa's voice came out even. "Before we talk numbers," she said, "I want you to read these." Silence. Then the Pierce representative nodded once, as if Alyssa had just said exactly what needed to be said. Alyssa slid Bree's letter on top of the box and stepped back. The meeting began. It lasted hours. Some voices tried to sound smooth. Some tried to sound righteous. Some tried to sound innocent. Alyssa listened and did not flinch. When someone used a phrase like operational efficiency, she asked for patient outcomes. When someone mentioned staffing challenges, she asked for resignation rates and overtime hours. When someone spoke about budget limitations, she asked where the last $50 million had gone. The room shifted as the questions kept coming. Not angry questions, accurate ones. By the time Alyssa left the boardroom, the sun had moved across the windows, and the hospital's afternoon rhythm had taken over. Staff scattered back to units. Patients arrived and left. The building kept working the way it always did. Alyssa stood in the hallway outside the boardroom for a moment, the folder tucked under her arm, the box of letters held by Tasha, and another nurse who insisted on carrying it for her. Hartley stepped beside her. Alyssa Hartley said quietly, "I meant what I said. I'm sorry." Alyssa looked at her. "Then help me," she replied. Hartley nodded a small motion that looked like surrender. "I will," she said. Alyssa walked toward the nurses' station on the main floor. People glanced up as she passed. Some smiled. Some simply watched as if they were still trying to understand whether the moment would hold. Alyssa reached the elevator bank, then stopped. She looked at the box of letters. She looked at the folder. She looked at the hospital around her, the place that had taken her life and now somehow was offering her a different way to live inside it. She breathed in the smell of disinfectant and coffee and human urgency. Then she turned toward the locker rooms. An hour later, Alyssa stepped onto the floor in scrubs. Not because she had to prove anything. Not because she was clinging to the old role out of fear. Because she wanted to feel something real under her hands again. Because the work still lived in her muscles. A nurse at the station looked up and grinned. "Director Carter," she teased. Alyssa shook her head, smiling despite herself. Alyssa, she corrected. The nurse laughed. Okay, Alyssa, room 214 needs a blanket. And Mr. Dawson is asking for you because he says you explain things without making him feel stupid. Alyssa grabbed a folded blanket from the warmer. I'll go, she said. She walked down the hallway, shoes quiet on the tile passing rooms filled with ordinary battles. A family huddled around a bed. A patient watching daytime television with the sound low. A nurse leaning close to a chart brow furrowed. Alyssa paused at a door and looked through the small window. For a second, she heard the hollow rattle of suitcase wheels in her memory, that strange sound of something rolling away, pulling her into a moment that changed everything. She pressed her hand flat against the door, steadying herself, then pushed it open and stepped inside.